Kong, Skull Island, the second movie in Legendary Pictures' Monsterverse, otherwise known as the Legendary Monsters Cinematic Universe. This is the second movie following 2014's Godzilla, directed by Gareth Edwards. However, this film was directed by Jordan Vogt Roberts, who is really known for a movie called The Kings of Summer that was in the Sundance Film Festival a few years ago. And it's interesting from a film fan's perspective because it continues this whole trend in Hollywood where they're taking these independent filmmakers and giving them these big budget movies. In fact, Gareth Edwards himself went from making this film called Monsters to Godzilla to, of course, Star Wars Rogue One. Now, what you should know before going into this movie, this Kong Skull Island, is that this is not a remake of the original King Kong at all. This is more like a soft reboot. The story of King Kong, going up the skyscraper, being captured, going to the city with the girl, that's not what happens in this movie whatsoever. This is a total, soft reboot, and the vast majority of the film takes place on Skull Island, and in many ways, Skull Island is a character unto itself. The characters in this film, the human characters, have to deal with not only Kong, but the other dangers on Skull Island, the other, oversized creatures that they run into, and to be quite frank, these creatures are, in many ways, more charismatic and have more characters than the human characters. So, one thing I will say is that the 2014 Godzilla movie, that's a movie where when I left the theater, I was really on cloud nine because I grew up a huge fan of kaiju. I love Godzilla, I love Gamera, I love Kong, even though Kong's not really kaiju. He kind of became an honorary kaiju, I guess you can say. But I love these movies as a kid growing up. I love the original King Kong, I love Godzilla. So the 2014 movie, I left the theater on cloud nine, and then when I rewatched the movie, it really wasn't as good as I remembered. I wanted more Godzilla. I thought that the human characters in that movie were not very interesting. I thought that Bryan Cranston was completely and utterly wasted in that film. And this movie, Kong Skull Island, does have similar problems, but in my opinion, they're not as bad. This movie is a fun movie. It's genuinely a fun movie to watch, and if you are looking for films that involve giant monsters tearing each other apart, having epic fights, this movie, you're going to get some enjoyment out of this film. There are problems, though. There's good and there's bad. Now, I was very surprised to find a lot of the critics on the web, who I do respect, panning this movie, saying it was disappointing. I totally get where they're coming from, but there's a certain way to watch this film to where maybe it's just me, but there is a certain charm to some of the problems in this movie, okay? Because there are good and there is bad, like I said. And the thing is that you cannot compare it to the original 1933 King Kong movie. That's more of a classic, cinematic. It's a cinematic classic. You can't deny that. This movie is just a badass action film, and at times it's very cheesy, and some of the stuff in this movie left me scratching my head and left me laughing when I wasn't supposed to laugh. There were things in this movie that are so damn cheesy and ridiculous, and you just burst out. I burst out laughing so many times because I was so entertained by this movie. And there are certain movies where, yeah, you recognize that the execution wasn't that great, but it makes you laugh because it's wacky. And I grew up on cheesy, canon Chuck Norris movies as well as some of the classics, so I can appreciate that, wackiness in a movie. With this film, though, it does have a severe identity crisis. There are parts of this movie where you're watching it and you're trying to take it seriously. It's a serious expedition to Skull Island. The characters have, a backstory and things like that, and you're watching it like a drama, and then in the next scene, you've got characters whipping out samurai swords and doing Kill Bill type shit. It's ridiculously inconsistent when it comes to the tone that it wants to tell you. The movie stars Tom Hiddleston, Samuel L. Jackson, John Goodman, Brie Larson, and a whole other cast of people, but those are the main four. And the one thing about the movie is you've got these four really good actors, and they do a somewhat decent job, but the material they're given is not the best. They're all pretty much just one-dimensional caricatures, and I feel weird expecting more from this kind of movie, but it was kind of notable. For example, Sam Jackson in the film, without going into spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about that here, he is this angry and stubborn military, colonel, lieutenant colonel, whatever. Makes a lot of really dumb decisions throughout the film. Then you have John Goodman, who is the curious, borderline scientist slash, explorer who doesn't tell everybody the real secret of what's going on here. Then you've got, of course, Tom Hiddleston, who is the main character, who has this whole backstory with, his father, which, is not too interesting to me. He did a decent job, but he was so one-dimensional and wooden sometimes that I almost feel like this was a paycheck movie for him. And then Brie Larson, of course, plays the curious photographer who has to take pictures of everything. So we've seen these archetypes before. I'm not really too angry about that because it seems like something that was expected. But the thing about the movie, like I said, very inconsistent. Parts of the movie feel like a big blockbuster, monster movie, popcorn flick, which is always a good thing. Other parts feel like a freaking Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus-esque, sci-fi channel B, monster movie. And there's a charm to those movies as well, but I think with this film, some people are probably going to get kind of confused about the direction of the movie. Like I said, there's parts in this movie where very dreadful things happen to certain characters. We're supposed to feel, I guess, upset or shocked, and I wound up just laughing my ass off. And I don't know if that's the intention that they had when they were making this. But the thing about me is there's a weird charm to the cheesiness. Like, the movie comes off very cheesy at times, but because I grew up with it, it doesn't bother me so much. And again, it's a case-by-case thing. But the good thing about the film is that it looks really, really good. Some of the shots are kind of overdone to give you this epic feel, and it doesn't always work. It actually comes off like a really bad Roland Emmerich film. Now, I don't want to in any way compare Kong Skull Island to the worst of Roland Emmerich, because that's like ice cream and horse manure. You know what I'm saying? This movie was leagues ahead of Godzilla 98, and I think was significantly better than Godzilla 2014. It really was. Kong's backstory I thought was really well done, even though it was a little bit cheesy. We're talking Jaws the Revenge type stuff. If you're a film fan, you know what I'm talking about. But to be honest, I cared more about Kong than I did the human characters. I just didn't care about them. They didn't do enough to make me care about them dying, them living. It did not work out. But I cared about Kong. I cared about what he was going to do, how badass he was going to be, and he certainly was really, really badass. Now, John C. Reilly is also in this movie, and that was interesting because he gets introduced in the second act, and I felt that in this movie, the plot of the movie shifted to being more about him. It was almost as if the film was always supposed to be about him, especially with the ending, and it ends up shifting to kind of focusing on him and kind of somewhat ignoring the main characters for a while. It's almost like he becomes the main character. So I thought that was a tiny bit poorly structured, but it didn't bother me to where I can sit there and say the film, and pan the movie. It just didn't bother me that much. The only thing that really kind of got under my skin was just the complete lack of balance, and of course the one-dimensional characters. There's a scene in the film where, and I'm not going to go into spoilers, but there's a scene in the film where one character finds out another character died because of a creature burping up a skull with dog tags on it. Come on, dude. That's one of those, I'm going to call it the come on bro moment. Dude, give me a freaking break here. There's so many times in this film where you're like, give me a break, But it's not supposed to be this uber realistic movie, but if you go into it thinking it is, and at the beginning, the first act, that's the thing. The first act does its damnness to make you believe this is a serious freaking drama film that's going to go somewhere, and it becomes a Saturday morning cartoon far too often. So there are issues there, but with me, I really liked it. I didn't think it was anywhere near as emotional because, of course, the one-dimensional characters as Logan was, or anywhere near as well made as Get Out. But to be honest, I had fun. I'm not gonna lie, I had fun. I love King Kong. I love seeing him kick ass. Just the scenery, the way that they actually constructed Skull Island in the film, the way it looked, just was really, really good stuff. Really enjoyed that part of the movie. And also, there is a post-credit scene, and without going into spoilers, it was very predictable. And that's another thing, too, about the movie is that the film is predictable. You can kind of see things coming ahead of time. But that to me is not always a bad thing, because if you're a fan of where they're going and the direction they're going in, you are going to pop. I mean, in some ways, I do kind of see how some of the studios want to pop the fanboys. I mean, that's why we even have post-credit scenes, to tease the fanboys. That's what they're there for. But you have to be fair and recognize its faults. And to me, the major fault of this movie was, like I said, very disjointed, and the characters, the human characters, were very one-dimensional. Just, I did not care about them, and I highly doubt you will too. But if you can get past all that and just watch the movie from the eyes of a 15-year-old who likes seeing badass monsters fight, you'll like the movie. You'll at least enjoy that aspect of it. Not great. I don't think Godzilla was great either. This is better, and I do look forward to seeing, Godzilla 2, which is coming up next, I believe, followed by Kong versus Godzilla, which is going to be, I think, in 2020 that's coming out. So overall, was it disappointing? Maybe a little bit to some, but I didn't go in there with the highest expectations. It was very muddled. It wasn't a well-made movie, but it was fun to watch, and that's kind of the best you can hope for. But I feel like with all the movies coming out this year, this is probably not one you're going to want to rush out to see. Obviously, Logan and Get Out are still in theaters. You should probably go watch those first, I would think. Power Rangers is coming up in a couple weeks, and I will be doing a review on that. And that one could end up being even cheesier than this one with the way the trailers look. But I'll give it a chance. I'm going to be fair. We'll see what happens. Maybe they should rename March of 2017 like Monster March, because we've got all these, monster movies, with Kong, and now we have Power Rangers who fight monsters in giant mechs. So, I mean, there you go. There's a theme there. I will check that movie out as well. But go see the movie if you like Kong. If you can see it matinee, I would see it there. It's not the best, not the worst. Let me know what you think. If you saw the film, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Also, please be courteous to others and put spoiler alert, please. I would really appreciate that. And thank you so much, guys, for subscribing to Geekdom 101 and for watching the content that I put out. So many more videos coming up this weekend, including a couple of big ones, and I hope you enjoy those. Thank you. I'll talk to you guys later.